Welcome to the Growthology Podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Hidalgo, CEO and co-founder of Digital Exhaust. And with me, I have Jennifer Gridley. Jennifer, welcome to the Growthology Podcast.
Thank you, Carlos. Great to be here.
And you were sharing with me before we recorded, this is your first ever podcast.
It is, yeah. So no pressure on you to make it a good one and pick some good questions.
Hey, you know what? I don't think there's any pressure at all. You and I have known each other now for a while. I think we met when, was it the growth community? Well, it was some community online. I presented, you and I connected, you were in transition. But one of the things I'm really excited about is, we've had some folks on the podcast who've been part of enterprise companies or are more on the consulting side, but you get to bring a startup perspective to growth marketing, which is wildly different than coming into an established brand or an established company or an enterprise company. So, excuse me. So I'm really excited to take that perspective and kind of hear how you've built your team, because since you started to now, completely different world. So we'll unpack all of that. But before we do, I would love to just hear from you is if you were not doing B2B marketing, what would you be doing?
I would probably be working for a nonprofit agency dedicated to food system reform. I believe that food is medicine. Food is at the heart of so much of the challenges we have in healthcare. It's also very closely linked to our environment and some of the climate crisis we're dealing with. So I'm a mission-oriented person, and that's one of the other causes I'm really passionate about.
I agree with you that what we're doing to our food, I think food is medicine. I know I'm very particular about my diet, and now as I get older, even more so. Are you doing anything right now just on a volunteer basis in that regard?
I do support my local food bank. I've done some volunteering. There's an organization near where I live called Gaining Ground, community farm that provides fresh produce to folks in need around the area. But I would love to be doing more. There's so much going on in terms of not for-profit organizations, as well as entrepreneurial ventures popping up around this cause. So I'm keeping an eye on it, and would love to get more involved in some form over in the future.
I love that. I think as professionals, we can get so caught up in our work and everything else that we have going on in life. But I think having time to volunteer, to impact, give back to our communities, even with our time. One of the things I know we try to do with our team is take a day a quarter where we shut down the offices and just say, go out and volunteer in your community. Even if it's just helping a family in need clean up their yard. Yep. Whatever that looks like. But I think it's so important. And it's interesting that you mentioned nonprofit. I actually started my career in nonprofit right out of college, and was in the office of development, donor development. So really that was my first ever interaction into what we now call content marketing, but storytelling and how do you write and copy and, how do you write copy and put all that together to elicit an emotion from your donor so that they give more. And I remember one guy telling me, if you want money, what did he say? If you want advice, ask for money. And if you want money, ask for advice. And I thought, man, I think there's a lot of principles we could take just from that little anecdote and apply it to sales and marketing. But I want to get into what your world has been. I think it's been 18 months you've been there at Elios Health.
It'll be 2 years next month.
Holy cow. Yeah. That's incredible. Because I remember when you and I were talking, you were like, hey, I've got this offer and what do you think? And it's crazy. So I've seen your posts on LinkedIn. It looks like things are going great. But when you took over marketing and were brought into Elios, you were really an army of one. You didn't have a team. There was a sales team established, and correct me where I'm wrong because I'm going from memory. But there was a sales team that was established, but you were brought in to lead marketing. And anybody who's brought into that situation, who's ever worked in a startup, realizes there's always something to be done. So I would love to understand from you, in terms of understanding you were brought in to help grow the organization because it is a startup. Where did you start with that process?
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with a quick bit of background. I'm a bit of an unusual head of marketing in that my roots are actually in finance.
Mm,
And so I grew up in the investor relations world where you had to know everything about the market. You had to be able to tell the story of the company. You had to know the numbers. You had to understand the competition. You had to understand how all the components of the business fit together. So
hmm
I came from a space where I was already predispositioned to orient that way, to really understand the business dynamics and the financials, and be both story oriented, but also numbers oriented as a professional. And I took that with me into a number of different roles outside of IR. Ultimately, I've gravitated to marketing because even back in my IR days, I was at my roots a storyteller. I
hmm
really enjoyed connecting, finding the right way to connect to an audience, to be of value, to help them understand the potential and the capability that the company had to offer and get excited about that. So ultimately, that is what marketing is all about. And marketing is a very analytically oriented discipline as well. So for me, it's been a great fit. And so I've held a bunch of different roles, but this is my first time actually being a pure head of marketing. I have
hmm
been a person who has grown marketing and sales teams. I've been a product marketer under a chief marketing officer, but this is my first time being a pure VP of marketing.
Sure.
So that was one of the reasons I got really excited about joining my company now, Elios Health. And just to quickly orient around what Elios Health is, we specialize in generative AI for behavioral health organizations in the United States. Our primary focus is on reducing documentation and administrative burdens for providers, such as therapists, case managers, social workers, so that they can focus more of their time on the care itself. We have a real crisis in the United States right now, as you may know. We have a limited supply of mental health care workers, a huge demand for mental health care that is not being met sufficiently. So we're, as a company, really addressing an acute, urgent pain point. We've been
hmm
around for about 4 years, and we're already the most widely adopted AI capability in behavioral health. And frankly, we're one of the most widely adopted AI capabilities in all of healthcare. So it's been an incredible ride, even in just these 2 years. It has felt like 3x that, to be honest. Like every month here is like a quarter, honestly. And I love it. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But yeah, I was brought in 2022 as marketing hire number one. And again, this was before ChatGPT came to market and AI
Right.
became super top of mind for the average consumer, right? Being inundated with AI based messaging and tools that they could use. Um, so in the behavioral health world, going in and trying to market to folks in that audience, none of them were already thinking about putting AI into their tech stack. It just
Sure.
wasn't top of mind. So my challenge as a marketer, my charter coming in from the CEO was, we need you to flesh out our product marketing strategy to properly position and package and message what we do,
Yep.
and enable our teams and go to market to carry that story. And we need you to work on our awareness, our demand generation, right? And ultimately fill the funnel. And
So
so,
that's a lot. That's a whole lot,
you
right? Just
know,
just
it's
right
something.
there.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned product, like where do we go with the product? You mentioned brand awareness, and then you mentioned demand generation, fill the funnel for sales. I mean, in most organizations, those are three separate roles, and usually have multiple people. And then we also know that content marketing has to support all of those. So add content
Right.
marketing layer. So in addition to not sleeping to be able to fulfill that, I'm really curious how you pulled on. You mentioned something which I think marketers really need to understand is the finance component, the business component
Yeah.
of business. And I'm still amazed at how many marketers I talk to who still can't read a balance sheet or understand what a P&L is. And they're just like, well, I'm the creative side of marketing. You did all of it. So I'm curious,
Mhm.
how did you pull on that finance experience and that finance training to fill product, brand, demand, and
Yeah.
content?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in vetting the opportunity to join the company, I did my due diligence, right, in terms
Mhm,
of the company's financial health, in terms of their pricing model, their product market fit. And I felt good on the surface about what I saw there, kind of the indicators of health that I would similarly think about if I were representing the company to the investment community. What are the
mhm,
economics of the business? What are the key performance indicators? How are those trending? How do they compare to benchmarks? So that was part of my process coming in. And then when I came in, as you may remember, I really put on my product marketing hat. And as a good marketer should, made it my business to first and foremost understand as much as I could about the customer,
mhm,
about the market, about the competition, about the company's product. So I interviewed pretty much every customer that we had at the time, which wasn't a huge list. So it was fairly easy to get through that and talk about what their buying processes were, why they chose the company, what other alternatives they considered, how do they typically make their purchase decisions, who do they trust in the industry, where do they get their information, what are their expectations for Elios, and how have their expectations changed pre post sale versus when
mhm.
they were in the sales process, right? What was messaged to them in the sales process, what's actually been the reality. So I really obsessed over, I like to use that term obsessed because that's the way that I feel. I just get voraciously curious and I really dug in and obsessed over what that story was, and with the eye toward how can I help replicate the successes that we've had with these early customers and turn these insights into strategies or programs that we can invest in and sort of develop a measurable, predictable set of outcomes from. And the thing that I heard time and time again was, I trust these associations, I trust these national and these regional groups, I go to these events. So it became very easy for me to see this needs to be an event led awareness and demand generation strategy out of the gates. Let's get in front of where the audience already is. Let's align to the people they already trust. And that's our fast track to getting to a better place pretty quickly with awareness and demand.
I I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. Full disclosure, I kind of knew some of it because Jennifer and I have stayed in contact through this process. But what you just said was like a master class condensed into 30 seconds about customer centricity. And what you said was it was a fast track to then developing, and I'm paraphrasing, but then developing the strategy to go out and fill the product bucket, the brand bucket, the demand bucket, right? Different flavors, but you started with the customer insights. So here's kind of where I'm going with that. So first of all, if we had a Growthology gold star, like boom, you get the gold star because what I just love what you said because it's so in tune with what I think every brand needs to do, whether you're enterprise or startup. How long did that process take? Because I know when you came in, it was internally, and I'm not throwing anybody internally under the bus. I think they all had the best of intentions, but it was like, we finally have marketing, and you were getting bombarded with all these requests. So how long did that process take? And then what was the internal messaging that you used to say, I want to get to everything, but I've got to do here so we can fast track these things and then do it the right way? I'm curious to that whole
Yeah.
inner working.
That's such a great question, because it does sound like easy, but it's not, right?
Right.
I have to credit our C-suite team with giving me the space to do what I just said. Like, I truly admire their restraint and the way that they were themselves not inundated me with all of these different requests, or not, bringing me in or putting me in front of certain lines of requests. They really did a good job protecting my bandwidth to be able to go through that exercise. And at the time, we also had a little bit of a diffusion of focus with regard to which types of organizations did we want to market to. So that was one of the other valuable aspects of what I was able to come in and do as a fresh new person with a fresh perspective was, again, run through that interview process and then come out the other side, being able to define our ideal customer profile, rein in some of that, or focus some of that growth energy in a better way, and then have what I call our master messaging guide really well aligned to get everyone on the same page, whether you're in sales or customer service, on how we are going to talk to and message to our ideal customer. And again, back to my strategy on awareness and demand gen, be able to go and show up in the places where they said that they would like to see us or expect to see us, and where they go for their information. And so I laid out my plan. I shared that plan. I got the buy-in. I got the support from the leadership team. And that is a lot of what helped me to keep that focus. Now, I laugh because earlier when you said I had two mandates, right? Product marketing and awareness/demand gen. But really, there's a lot even between those two. I remember you and I were saying, you still have to do the other things. There's still PR to do. We had a PR agency at the time. There's still content marketing to do. There's still a social media account that needs to be managed. Like, you say it's the two things, but it's honestly all marketing in some way. There's a bit of every piece of marketing that's going to be involved here. And that's what it was for me. I was just, a bit frenetic, but, really, setting a clear plan, putting some top-down goals. So that's another thing that really helped me align to others in the business, is I did pick from the top down, because I had no idea bottom up. We had no past data to generate a bottom up plan, but like top down, how many opportunities should I be able to get generated from this event strategy by the end of the year? What sounds reasonable? Okay, right? And we picked something, and then I was able to kind of read out to the team and read out to the company on how that was going. And then I was able to produce, after a few months, these core assets: the ideal customer profile, the master messaging guide, and a revamped set of enablement resources tied to that messaging and to that audience. So within the first 6 months, I was able to generate about 20 new opportunities worth millions of dollars. So our ACV is in the low six figures. Plus influence a bunch of other opportunities that maybe, let's say we had an event, maybe it was sales that still did a cold outbound to invite someone to the event, but it was because of the event that person said yes, right? And that they took the meeting. Or during, the event, we were able to engage some existing opportunities and accelerate them through the funnel. So by the end of the year, we were influencing, if you will, in marketing well over our goal in terms of opportunities coming into the funnel and moving through the funnel.
Well, I think the fact that you're calling out your executive team and saying they gave you the bandwidth. We don't have the time to kind of delve into all those conversations, but first of all, kudos to them, right? Because these guys or ladies have a mandate. They have investors. So many times in the startup world, it's go, 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 go. And, one of the things we preach is the difference between doing things right and doing it right now. And then also kudos for you for going to your executive team saying, hey, let's understand what the reality of the situation is. But even the fact that you did all of that, and then within 6 months, were able to create several $1 million in pipeline. I mean, that is in marketing world, that is flying. The sad part is a lot of organizations don't want to even give 6 months for that. It's like, well, we have marketing automation and we have all this MarTech and we have this and we have blogs and a website. How come we can't flip the switch? So within all that, you mentioned the word alignment briefly. it's amazing to me how alignment still is a struggle for so many organizations, which is only a proof point that it's people who fill these jobs. So within all of that, and I don't want to necessarily lead you to an answer, so
Yeah.
feel free to tell me I'm wrong. It sounds like you use the data, not just the verbatim from the customers, but also some of the financial data, some of the data you glean from sales to bring sales, marketing, product, and customer service together to then say, this is how we're going to go to market. This is how we're going to tell our story. This is what the customer is about. Was that a struggle? Was it light bulbs going off once the data came to light? What was that process like? And I know it's not a one and done thing. So tell me about the beginning of that process and then where you are in that process today.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be honest, maybe to take a different tact in answering that, like at the
Sure.
beginning, we didn't really need that much alignment. I mean, to be honest, yes, we needed to make a decision to focus more and not go after
Mhm.
so many different segments of the market and pick like a key segment in a key audience and just own that, and use that as our stepping stone to broader growth opportunities in the future. That was definitely
Sure.
kind of a company level exercise to rein that in a bit. But also at the time, our customer success team was very nascent. Our sales team was only a handful of people when I first joined. So there weren't like so many people and so many entrenched processes that needed to be like aligned
Hmm.
that it was in itself an exercise to do that. We were able to be pretty scrappy and nimble because it was only a handful of people that, and again,
Okay.
back to your opening point, this is like Series A land, right? This isn't big
Hmm.
company established departments and stuff. This is like a handful of people that can turn on a dime essentially and decide to do things differently together. Now, fast forward, we're a larger company. We're Series B. We're still relatively small. We're just over 100 employees, but even our head of customer success just started a year ago, and we
Okay.
really in the past year have also evolved our sales organization quite considerably. So we're still navigating alignment. But early on, to admit this, I mean, yeah, I had to be data oriented with my marketing program goals and reading out on
Sure.
progress, but I didn't necessarily need to do anything drastic to align teams and get them rowing in the same direction, because we were so small. And the CEO, who ultimately everyone reports to, was really able to drive that kind of alignment across teams.
That's such an important part is that alignment has to come from the top. I'm trying to think, and I can't think of any off the top of my head where that kind of alignment started from a bottoms up. It always has to be a mandate from the tops down. So even regardless of the size, the fact that your CEO took the stance to say, look, you guys have to align here. And again, using that data, both the numerical data and then the qualitative data from the customers, I think is super important to then say, okay, can we all align around this? You also mentioned where you said, rather than kind of doing a shotgun approach, you really narrowed the focus into an industry segment and said, let's own that. And then we could branch out. How did you arrive at that specific segment? And was it easier because you were smaller to bring people onto that focus? Or was it kind of like herding cats for a while to get everybody to go, okay, let's
Yeah,
go here?
it took a little while because there were, first of all, in sales, like back then, it was very much a cold call oriented strategy.
Mhm.
And there was a sense of we've got to get out to as many people as possible because we only have a handful of customers. We're still forming our product market fit. The
Mhm.
point is to get people who are willing to work with us right now. It almost doesn't matter what type of organization they're with. Like, we just need customers, we need revenue.
Right.
Get this thing off the ground and like fund the additional investments in R&D or whatever. So there was definitely it took some time to sort of shift folks off. So you know what we found is that There was a segment called Community Behavioral Health, which is around 6 to 7,000 organizations. There's some market data available right on how you can size the different segments of the market. So we did some work around that. And we also looked at our customer base and looked at our sales data and saw where we were winning the most business. And there were some
Mm-hmm.
characteristics beyond demographics or technographics that were germane to the community mental health space that lent themselves better, as a fit. So some of it was like obvious, because we could see in the data, we could see in our win rates that, well, this is actually working better. We're getting more traction here. So let's like double down. But it did take some time because, especially as an earlier stage company, you have that balance of I need to bring in revenue, but I
Right.
also don't want to take on business that I can't serve that will create, a negative reputation for us in the market. And I think that the company did strike a balance across that, and we're still refining. And I have a great story I can share. Fast forward to today, where we did just go through a really fantastic realignment cross-functionally across the go-to-market team with product, with leadership around who our ICP is. And we actually set goals in terms of pipeline composition to say we want at least 80% of our pipeline to come from this customers fitting these criteria, because we know these criteria are more highly correlated with retention, with ease of implementation from a cost and service perspective. It's better for us. We can deliver better service. We have more bandwidth left over to invest in new capabilities if most of our customers fit this criteria. And once we set goals and set our minds to something, we all do a pretty good job of getting the job done and hitting those goals. So we've come a long way.
Well, again, what the common thread for anybody who's listening is being data driven. You're not just out there making decisions saying, well, we heard this and that, right. That's such a challenge in startups is you is so many times you're at the whim of the CEO and what they think about on their drive into work this morning, or they see a billboard and go, hey, we should be doing that. But I really applaud you and your entire team for truly saying, let's take a look at the data and let the data tell us where we need to go, and resist that temptation to say, well, we just got to get revenue, so let's just grab it for where we can, because then you're a mile wide and an eighth of an inch thick and there's no depth. The other thing I love that you're doing is saying we want X amount of revenue. I think you said 80% of revenue out of this ICP. So now that you've established, we can dare use the word niche or ownership of that segment, you're still going to hit that segment, but now it allows you to branch out into other segments. And I would imagine that'll be an ongoing exercise where you say, okay, now we have, let's just say 4 or 5 segments, and we can divvy up the revenue across all those segments. So you're not so reliant on one that perhaps you have 60% penetration. Now you can start to move into other segments of the market, take the learnings from that ICP, apply it here, and so on. So is that the plan ongoing across the organization?
Yeah. I mean, and even it's funny, even within the 80%, we almost have like an ICP within a segment, if that makes sense. So community mental
Yep.
health is a segment, but within that, there are certain characteristics of organization that we
Sure.
have a track record of success with. So again, let's rinse and repeat. Let's look for more of those, right? And then we can branch even more into that segment, let alone other segments that may be tangential to that in behavioral health. So yeah, I really admire the discipline that this founding team has shown in really being thoughtful about the pace of growth, the discipline around these decisions. We've learned we haven't always made, we all haven't always, made the right decisions at every turn, but we've made the
Sure.
best decision possible, and we've learned from what hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also seen the team very intentionally hire folks, who have certain levels of experience and come from different disciplines to really complement their skill set, and they listen. One of my colleagues in marketing, we were in a meeting recently with the CEO, and we were debating about like a term that we should use or not use in our positioning. and he stopped the meeting and he said, so and so, what do you think? And this is a
Mm,
person several levels, down the org chart. That moment like built so much trust and appreciation with the employee. It really showed that level of like humility that our leadership
yeah.
team has, and recognizing that we hire people because we want their points of view. We want them to assert their perspective. We want to hear those things. And I honestly think that's a lot of how we've been able to be as nimble and quick and agile in getting to these results so quickly in such a short amount of time. And again, it's back to like the leadership philosophy, the leadership orientation. And I
Hmm.
haven't seen that kind of behavior at a lot of companies, and I find it really refreshing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if after this podcast airs that you're going to get a lot of inquiries. Hey, are you guys hiring? Based on what you're doing. And again, congratulations on this journey. I can't believe it's been 2 years. Um, Lots of things going right in the organization. Like you said, hey, we haven't always made the right decision. We made the best decision given the information we had at the time, and we're quick to course correct. But as we know, there's always challenges. There's always obstacles. There's always things that happen. And even the best organization, and I'm a huge culture hawk. Um, I think that it's incredible. Hold on, I'm getting a message here that we're trying to reconnect. Are you
I
still
see
connected?
I see
Okay.
that too. One away.
Okay. Let me start that over. Um, Lots of things going right in the organization, and but there's always challenges, right? And that's always going to happen. Nothing ever goes 100% according to plan. So I'm curious, in your role, what you have seen over the last 2 years, and maybe even talking to other marketers in some of the communities that you're a part of. What are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges to growth for your organization, or just the big M marketing and sales at large?
So I'll start with speaking about my company currently, and then I'll probably share some comments overall in general on some of those barriers to growth maturity. So for us, as I mentioned, we are an incredibly agile organization, pride ourselves on how quickly we can advance,
Hmm.
and overachieving left and right, right? That's kind of what we aspire to. Um,
Yeah.
and so one of the learnings we are having is, sometimes, certain things it's better to go slower on, whereas other things you can go faster.
Mm.
How do we distinguish that? How do we know when we need to stop and be more planful? Who needs to be involved in that? So we're sorting that out. We're also sorting out a little bit around capacity, meaning how many things in parallel can we tackle? So even if we're making good
Mm.
decisions about pacing for individual initiatives, concurrently, how many initiatives can we be running at once?
Right.
And we run into some issues where, whoa, have we taken on so much? And we've gotten like
Yeah.
honestly, like January 2024, the joke around our company was like, what a year that was.
Oh
Honestly,
wow.
January
Oh wow.
felt like a year. I've never experienced anything like it in my career. It was just incredible. We set deadline, like February 1 was a deadline for like 5 to 10 important things. We had
Wow.
4 weeks, you know. So we've gone through some incredible sprints, and we all love it. We all love the mission. We love the challenge. But I think we have been able to reflect and say, like, again, not don't think that that's a sustainable pace.
Hmm.
Or, hey, in hindsight, had we taken a few more weeks on X, we could have done Y. Um,
Sure.
and and so anyway, I think it's been very healthy. I think it's better to push ourselves too hard than not push hard enough, so that we can learn what our capacities are. We can learn what the right pacing needs to be, because in our market, the AI world, things are moving very, very quickly. So if you're not
Yeah.
if you don't have an aggressive posture, you may not be around for long. So that's one thing about Elios. I'd say more broadly, I just think people are so important. If you don't have the right people and you don't have good collaboration across teams, you don't have leadership who's open to trying new things, who are open to empowering people in the organization to make decisions and run, those are really big barriers because you're not going to get the best ideas onto the table, and you're not going to be communicating enough along the way and collaborating enough along the way to constantly be learning. So I think another characteristic, in addition to being data driven, is having this continuous learning orientation that kind of pairs with having the data. Having the data is no good if no one's using it and looking at it. And back to my favorite term,
Sure.
obsessing over it. So you need to have that culture. And, I think another aspect is people get fixated on the results and the numbers on the page. And they aren't as appreciative enough of the processes that lead to those outcomes, the inputs that drive the outcomes.
Sure.
I bring a pretty operational mindset to the way I lead as well. Like I think that your outcomes are a function of your inputs and your processes. And do you really understand what the highest quality activities are for you to be doing in your role? How much of your time are you doing those activities? Right. And how do we connect that to the outcomes? So I think that when you take it for granted that, oh, we're just going to get these results, and you don't really understand the inputs, or you aren't attending to those inputs or measuring those inputs as well, you're going to have trouble with growth at some point. You're not going to really get to a place where you have sustainability or predictability. So those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah. So constant optimization, verifying the data, and not just doing it as a one-off. But you said something really important, and I got to say, I don't hear a lot of people talk about this when it comes to growth. It's the people. It's having the right people that are willing to invest themselves, their thought capital. But I'm also, when you said that, I thought of your CEO, to look at somebody who's a few rungs down on the org chart and stop a meeting and say, hey, what do you think? I mean, just that speaks volumes to a CEO who, again, is leading by example to say, let's be curious. Let's not assume we know everything. So I love that you brought that aspect to growth, because, businesses are people businesses. No matter what business we're in, it's all about the people. And if I give my people the permission to be curious, to learn, to analyze data, to use data to either prove a point or disprove an assumption, what a great place to be. And, again, not everything's going to go our way, but you're going to win a whole lot more than you lose. And career-wise, you take that skill set, you can go to any company now and
Absolutely
turn it around.
Yeah, it gives you agency. It kind of democratizes leadership. It brings it enables everybody to act like an owner in the business.
Yeah.
And I think, there are growth teams, there are go-to-market teams, sales, marketing, CS, product. Everybody owns growth in the organization. Everybody is responsible because growth means, not just the revenue, but it means, how are we growing skills within the organization? How are we growing and evolving our culture? How are we growing our understanding of the market? How are we evolving our product set? That mindset of that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, that's something you need everybody to carry.
Yeah.
And so it's great when all that comes together and you have the right leadership and the right mix of people. And one of the dynamics I've really loved to see, and I'll just use my team as an example, when you hire the right people, when you bring people in who have strong expertise in their functions, and you complement, when you build a team, you kind of, it's like a portfolio diversification, right? You back to my finance background. Oh my, that's really coming out now. But
I love it.
You diversify the skills and experiences, and you hire high caliber people, not just because you need that function to be led in a high caliber way, but there's a multiplying effect when other people on that team interact with that high caliber colleague, it ups their game. Like we
Right.
just had a colleague demonstrate something, and one of the other team members on the team was like, I cannot tell you what a privilege it is to work with such talented people. It is so
That's
inspiring.
awesome.
It is so invigorating. I just got chills like talking about it. Like it's really amazing when you can assemble that and you can see that, that there's there becomes this bottom up kind of natural built in activation of motivation and intrinsic motive that intrinsic motivation really builds. You can't force that. You can't
Right.
force how somebody feels, but you can create the conditions for the right kind of people to do their best work. And that is that is what the best companies spend a lot of time thinking about and doing. And I hold myself to that standard as a leader, that that is what I need to cultivate and create. Yes, I own marketing, but I also own bringing in the right people and also being a good teammate in turn to my colleagues across the business.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And you're speaking our language. Growth, of course, we want to see revenue growth, customer growth, but it's also the growth in the people. And if you can be a part of helping someone acquire a new skill, improve in a certain area, adapt to a certain situation, even just grow in how business gets done, right? Sharing some of your financial know-how. To me, that's all part of the growth, and that's what makes companies, that's to me what takes good companies and makes them great. And when people start beating down that door to say, I want to be there, I think it's so vitally important. So last question for you before we wrap all this up. Where do you see the next phase of growth coming, just in B2B in general? And if you want to relate it back to Elios, I'm happy to do that. But there's so much in the market today. We inundated with Gen AI. You've got all these go-to-market motions, all these models. It's just, I talk to marketers a lot, and they're like, and even salespeople, it's becoming overwhelming. And then add to it customer complexity. So where do you see that next phase of growth? If you were to say, hey, in the next 2 to 5 years, here's where we should be looking as marketers.
That's a great question. Just to comment on the AI thing, and make a plug for an organization I follow, Market One, MKT1. They they just did a survey of marketers around AI, and there's a lot of AI tools in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're early. We're still early in really understanding what this means for our discipline. And I think just as I, coming from an AI company, but serving a different end market in behavioral health, we have to prove AI really needs to demonstrate value and really needs to be able to tie into some urgent pain points and needs, in order for, at least in the marketing world, for this to become standard, as part of our tech
Mm-hmm.
stack, part of our operating model. We're just not to the point where it's standard yet to use AI,
Right.
at least not that I've seen. And again, my perspective is limited. But there's so much promise, and I am absolutely convinced that as a marketer, if you don't develop an understanding of where this fits in your strategy and your tech stack, you are going to become obsolete potentially as a
Mm-hmm.
marketer. You are going to be severely lacking in your skills. So I do think that the marketing discipline will greatly benefit from AI, but needs to learn more, in order for that to become. And then in terms of just growth and go to market in general, I think we're still, if I reflect even over the past 5, 6 to 10 years, maybe, ABM is still like relatively new. Like a lot of companies, even
Mm-hmm.
mature companies, aren't really embracing account-based strategies and integrated motions, really collaborating across sales, marketing, customer success. I
Mm-hmm.
still think we have more work to do there as a marketing industry. I still don't think the average company has um, moved entirely away from some of the kind of spray and pray tactics and traditional tactics that you'd see. We even see this in the SDR or BDR space. So I'm in the process of, I just moved the BDR organization into marketing at Elios. And that's one of the things we're evolving is the whole basis for the BDR function. Where does it fit? How are we nurturing accounts? How are we prioritizing? And when I'm out there recruiting for BDRs, it's hard. It's rare to find SDRs or BDRs that have been part of account-based marketing strategies and have seen strong collaboration between sales and marketing in a more strategic way of going to market and engaging with accounts. So I'd say, with my crystal ball in the next 5 years, I think that we're going to see a lot of progress and continued movement toward this model, especially as fueled by AI. Like they kind of go hand in hand, right? So I think there's a lot of promise.
Well, from your lips to God's ears.
Quote me on everything, and then we'll look at this 5 years from now.
Right? Fantastic breakdown of using a data-driven, people-based, customer-centric approach. Thank you for sharing that. And I do want to give you kudos to everybody who is listening to this episode. Correct me if I'm wrong. When you came into this role 2 years ago, did they bring you in at a director level or was it a senior manager level?
It was a senior director. Yeah.
Okay. So a senior director level, but because of the approach that you took, methodical, data-driven, both quantitative and qualitative, alignment, really trying to get some focus and prioritization. Within 2 years, you achieved VP role, head of marketing, kind of on a rocket ship right now in terms of the organization. So congratulations to you. I love seeing this progress. This is growth in an individual role, and now you're getting to lead growth in your organization. So Jennifer, thank you so much for sharing your insights, being willing to come on. We're thrilled that this is your first podcast. I'm sure you're going to get invites after this because the way you break it down has been fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us on the Growthology Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Carlos.
All right. Well, this will be a wrap. We will have all of Jennifer's details in terms of social. If you want to follow her, I highly recommend it in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on the Growthology Podcast. And we hope that you are able to take some of these practical insights and apply it to your organizational growth. Thank you so much.